When is the best time to use a Catan shard? Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. In this video we're going to be talking about Catan shards. When is best to use them? We're going to go through the 4 Catans, the character ones that is. Of course we do have the Tesseract bolts, but we're not including that in this video today. And we're going to be talking about why they're so good and so useful to our lists. We are then going to talk about the 6 detachments and how they interact with those detachments, and of course the units that are within those detachments as well, the common ones, and how they synergize with those said units. So we're going to get into that today. Let's get into it. We've got these 2-tone Canoptek Scarab dice. You've got the hint of blue in there, the hint of green in there, but they're also translucent. They are see-through. These are fantastic. Available on the Baron of Dice website. Okay, so we're talking about those 4 Catan shards, or 4 Catan. They're all characters. 3 of them are epic heroes, and 1 of them is a transcendent, so you can actually take 3 of them. You've got the Void Dragon, which is our sort of... he kind of does everything, doesn't he? He can shoot, he can fight, pretty good against vehicles, just an all-round good model, and it's quite a new model. It looks cool. You've got the Nightbringer, more of the melee threat, can still do a lot of work in at range, but mainly in melee. Has an old model, is quite a small model, slightly annoying, so it makes him quite slow because his base isn't that big to be able to sort of do 180 turns and go the other way. We've then got the Deceiver, not commonly used but isn't bad. It's just that we've got better options, and of course you've got that Grand Illusion ability where you can redeploy and all that kind of jazz. Has precision and is okay. He's okay. And then the Transcendent Catan Shard, which is not epic hero, so you can take 3 of them. Has that teleporting ability as well as Deep Strike, don't forget. So that's the 4 Catans that we're going to be talking about in this video. Now, why are they good? Why are Catan shards or Catan in general good for the Necrons faction in game? Well, it's mainly to do with their resiliency, in my opinion. When you've got toughness 11, you've got a 4+ armor and a 4+ invulnerable save, so you're guaranteeing a 4+ pretty much no matter what, apart from mortal wounds of course. You've got then 12 wounds, and then the 5+ Feel No Pain on top of that, which will interact with mortal wounds, and then of course it's halving damage as well. So all that combined is very tough, very tanky, and you're going to need to put a lot into it, and none of that even includes reanimation protocols, which is our Necrons army rule. So yeah, put all that alongside each other, and it's quite difficult to remove a Catan shard. They're going to have to put a lot into it. That's just the first part, the first element of a Catan. The second is obviously the offense and how good they are at range and in melee. Sometimes a bit of both. We've already gone through which ones are good at what. But that's what makes a Catan, in my opinion, as good as they are. I mean, those keywords though, that's the one drawback with the Catan is the lack of keywords. They're not supposed to have the keywords. They're not meant to have anything. They're not going to be cryptex. They're not going to be overlords or triarch. We know that, and that's why they don't necessarily interact with some of the detachments as good as other units in our faction can. So that's what we're going to go on today. In fact, before we move on, I just want to mention this because I'll forget later on. And of course, epic heroes can't have enhancements. But also the Transcendent Catan, even though it's not an epic hero, it also can't have enhancements. As you can see from the bottom right of your screen, Catan Shard is the ability, can't have enhancements. So no enhancements whatsoever, which kind of takes away a lot from any of the detachments in terms of throwing in extra buffs and bonuses. Right then, so let's get into our codex then, into our trusty Necrons codex, and we've got the 6 detachments now. Well, there's 5 detachments in the codex, and then we've got a PDF download during the Christmas. It was the Grotmas thing, wasn't it? So we've got the Awakened Dynasty, we've got the Canoptek Court, Annihilation Legion, the Obeisance Phalanx, the Hypercrypt Legion, and as we mentioned, the Starshatter Arsenal, which is the Grotmas calendar entry that we got, our 6th detachment, which is pretty cool. So that's the 6 that we've got. Let's start us off with the Awakened Dynasty. How do Necron Catans interact in this detachment? Now, the detachment rule is when you've got a Necron's character leading a unit, Of course, Catan cannot lead a unit, they can't be led, so you're not going to interact with that detachment rule whatsoever. So already so far, that's a bit of a dud. We've already mentioned that we can't have enhancements, so you can skip straight past the enhancements page. We can't add those on. Now, there are some stratagems. There's actually 4 stratagems that can relate to Catan. They may not be the best served on Catan. There's probably better units in your list that you can use these on, but they still do interact. So we're going to briefly go through these. You've got the command protocol of Conquering Tyrant, so you can reroll hit rolls over 1 at half range. I mean, the hit on 2s, rerolling 1s is pretty much not quite guaranteeing a hit, but as good as. You've got the protocol of Hungry Void for a +1 to the strength. You've got the protocol of Vengeful Stars, so if a destroyed unit within 6 gets destroyed, you can then shoot. And the protocol of Sunstorm to give your Catan Assault. Now, you're not going to be charging, of course, after Assault, after advancing, but it means you can move, advance, and then still shoot. So all 4 of those stratagems can relate to the Catan. The Vengeful Stars one is 2 CP, quite expensive, but to be honest, there's probably better targets for literally all of these. But they do work. They do work. The same can't be said with a lot of these other detachments. The Canoptek Court is the next one. When you've got your power matrix unlocked, you can get a you get rerolls of 1s to hit. And you can reroll all the hit rolls if you're within your power matrix, but that only applies to Cryptex and Cryptic units and Canoptek units. So it doesn't quite apply to the Catan. However, they do assist with opening the power matrix for those Canoptek units and for those Cryptek units, because they're going to be battling in the no man's land. So you're going to be using their OC, hopefully unlocking the power matrix, and maybe you've got a Plasmancer with some immortals, and they're going to be re-rolling all the hits within the power matrix because of that single Catan that's fighting in the no man's land and holding on to a primary objective, and therefore opening your power matrix. Now, there's only one stratagem in the Canoptek Court that does relate to the Catan, and it's Solar Pulse. And it doesn't actually get spent on the Catan, it gets spent on a Cryptek, so you still need a Cryptek because it is the Canoptek Court, and you're selecting an objective marker within 18 of the Cryptek, and then until the end of the phase, all friendly models get to ignore cover. So it slightly helps the AP, if you like, of the range attacks. They don't get to do it because they're not going to have a cover save anymore. 1 CP, it works. Might be better options, but that's what you've got, and that's all you've got with the Canoptek Court. The Annihilation Legion, pretty much everything relates to Destroyer Cult units and Flayed ones, getting a rerollable charge and all that stuff, so again, that's not going to relate to Catan. Yeah, the problem with this attachment is we've got quite a lot of a melee threat with the Scorbut Destroyers in particular. So if anything, we need like a shooty assistance. We need your Locust Destroyers. You might need other things, Doomsday Arcs, potentially to back up the Scorbut Destroyers. Not necessarily Catan, I could be wrong there, but I think Locusts are better in that detachment. So you're not going to relate to the Catan whatsoever, in my opinion. And stratagems is a complete dull, it's a complete null void. You're not getting anything. There's no stratagems whatsoever that relate to Catan. So in my opinion, you just wouldn't take Catan in the Annihilation Legion. The Obeisance Phalanx is the next one, is the 4th one I think we're on now. This one only relates to Nobles and Lich Guard and Triumph for the +1 to the wound roll. And the Catan are obviously not going to have any of those keywords. Stratagem wise, you've got the Enslaved Artifice stratagem as the only option there for 5+ critical hit rolls. That's only going to really help the Void Dragons with the Voltaic Storm range attack. That's because it's got sustained hits too. And the Transcendent Catans have also got sustained hits with the Seismic Assault, as well as the Crackling Tendrils in melee. That's the only 2 that this could work with. 5+ critical hit rolls. The Nightbringer and the Deceiver don't have anything that can relate to critical hit rolls. So it's a bit of a dud in that detachment as well. Onto the Hypercrypt Legion, of course we're going to be hyperphasing units, in and out, and all that jazz. It does work with them. It does work with all Necron units, so therefore you can pull off one of your Catan and then bring them back in. Now there's a few problems here. The first problem is maybe you're on a primary objective, and if you're leaving the primary objective, you're not going to score your points off the board. So you kind of need to stay, especially if you're fighting in the no man's land. Second of all, when you re-enter the battlefield, you're going to have to do it from a table edge, 9 inches away, and it may make your charge quite difficult. I mean, you can call that a nice problem to have, because maybe you're a lot further than that. Just note here though that Transcendent Catan does work much better in this detachment, because the Transcendent has Deep Strike. So when you're hyperphasing back in, you're reusing your Deep Strike ability, which is good, really. It's good. But the Transcendent Catan does have his own teleport advance ability. He can't charge though, that's the only problem with that. He can't charge if he uses that teleporting ability. But he can do the Deep Strike and then charge. So it depends on how you play it. But the point I'm making here is that the detachment rule does work with Catan in this detachment. For the stratagems in the Hypercrypt Legion though, there is one stratagem that does work, which is the, what's it called now, Reanimation Crypts. But your Warlord does need to be still active, still alive. And if your Warlord is alive and you've hyperphased one of your Catan off the battlefield, you can do your reanimation protocols off the battlefield, because of course you're going to miss it as you're not on the battlefield. So that's for 1 CP if you wanted to do that. But all the other ones, you can't do them. They pretty much relate to the monolith, and even Cosmic Precision isn't going to relate because they're monsters. And then finally we've got the Starshatter Arsenal, which is our Christmas detachment, where vehicles are mounted to get the assault keyword, but more importantly, you get a +1 to the hit roll if you are attacking units that are within range of an objective. That does work. It does work because that's all units, all Necron units. However, we do already hit on 2, so it's only when there's a negative modifier that this will actually assist us, because otherwise we just hit on 2s anyway. We can't get better than a 2 unless there's a modifier, like a -1 to hit, of course. So that's the only time it's going to really help. I wanted to just throw this part in as well, because it's an enhancement, which obviously they can't take enhancements, but you could put this on an Overlord or a Command Barge. Units within 6 inches get to reroll hit rolls of 1 and movement rolls of 1. That could be put, like I said, on your Command Barge within 6 inches of a Void Dragon and a Nightbringer, for example. So they're going to be rerolling. So there's a bit of synergy there, which does help. You've also got the stratagems. There's 3 that do relate to Catan in this example. You've got the Merciless Reclamation, which is a +1 to wound on units that are on objectives. So if you're going against those units on objectives, you're already getting a +1 to hit, potentially, with the modifiers. And then a +1 to wound. It is 2 CP though. Quite expensive. You've got the Endless Servitude one, which is basically reanimation on objective markers. Into the fight phase. That works. That's actually a really good one for Catan, because the Catan are quite hard to get them to remove wounds. And this is the end of any of the fight phases. So it could be your opponent's fight phase, pop this for 1 CP, reanimate one of these Catans, then our command phase is about to come, reanimate again. If you've got a reanimator nearby, you're doing that kind of effectively twice per phase. So it could be like 4 D3 before you've even moved. And if you've got a Technomancer, that's another D3. So it stacks quite nicely there. That is definitely one to use. And Reactive Reposition is definitely also another one to use. If you get shot or get targeted, you can... I'm just double checking it. Yeah, it's a normal move up to D6. So it isn't a normal 6-inch move, it's a D6 movement. But that could get the Catan up the board, get them ready for lining up a charge, get into assault in a unit. So that is the 6 detachments. I think it's only really the Starshatter Arsenal and potentially the Hypercrypt Legion that do work with Catan. I mean, they work with every detachment, but they kind of run solo. We'll talk about that later on. But next I want to talk about some Catan unit synergy. And the first one, Technomancer. The Technomancer is going to be able to heal D3 lost wounds to a unit nearby in our movement phase. That could be one of those Catans. And like I said, you've just reanimated in your command phase. You're going to get another D3 from the Technomancer in your movement phase. All that hard work that your opponent's just done to take away like 5 wounds off of your Void Dragon, you could literally just remove all that hard work. Got it all back. It's cool. You get it all back, and then they've done nothing. They've done nothing. Now the Technomancers work in virtually every detachment, especially if they're leading, Canoptek Wraiths in the Canoptek Court. Maybe they're leading Immortals in the Awakened Dynasty. Or, there's so many options when you've got Technomancers, and I quite like Technomancers. They're pretty good. They're probably not seen as much in the Starshatter Arsenal though, because That's more to do with mounted units and vehicles, and a Technomancer's units that he leads are neither of those. So not as considered, because you've also got the option like a Canoptek Spider, for example, in those detachments. The next unit to speak about is that Reanimator we just mentioned as well, so getting double reanimation is definitely handy for a Catan. For 75 points you're going to be getting an extra D3 back. That could be vital, could be really good. And we mentioned it in the Starshatter Arsenal, if you're using that detachment, the Endless Servitude stratagem, if you're reanimating in the fight phase and you've got a reanimator nearby, it's 2 lots of D3 and then you do it again in the command phase. Beautiful, that's a lot. That's a lot. We've mentioned the Silent King as well earlier on, but he can be in virtually any detachment. Works best in the Starshatter Arsenal as well as the Obeisance Phalanx. But yeah, you've got that Fair of Stars ability to reroll hit rolls and rerolls of a 1. Very handy. The last thing you want to be doing with your Nightbringer is rolling a 1 to wound when your strength is outrageous and you roll a 1. But the Silent King's there, you get to reroll it. That's nice. You can have a +1 to strength and a rerollable charge roll with the Fair of Blades. That rerollable charge roll is pretty good. The +1 to strength is going to be very situational depending on which Catan and what the enemy unit is, but it's more about the rerollable charge because we don't really have access to rerollable charge in our codex apart from the Annihilation Legion and Praetorians. That's sort of about it. Catan definitely don't have it. This is the way to get it. You've got the ignore modifiers as well. A lot of people like that one. I tend to not bother unless I can see a real obvious negative modifier. Then yeah, maybe I would select it. And then the final piece of synergy I wanted to mention today is the Trike Stalker. Trike Stalker I've seen these popping up a little bit more lately because of the Starshatter Arsenal. They also work in the Obeisance Phalanx because of the Trike keyword, of course. Fairly cheap, but their ability is why they can synergize. They've got the targeting relay. Once they've shot, they remove the benefits of cover. So you shoot first with your Trike Stalker, you then shoot with your Gaze of Death for your Nightbringer, and then, yeah, they've not got cover. So the AP does stick. So it's not the biggest of synergies, but again, they are pretty much selected in most Starshatter Arsenal lists now, and that's probably where I'm looking at in this video in particular. The Starshatter Arsenal seems to be, I don't want to say a go-to because that's sort of very presumptuous that everyone's just playing the Starshatter. Everyone's playing everything at the minute, but at the moment, for me personally, the Starshatter Arsenal is the one. We've got cheap vehicles with invulnerable saves. The Silent King could be thrown into there with tank shock and all that kind of jazz. And if you're throwing a Catan in there on top of that, then even better. So that's what I think the best detachment for Catan shards are. But when we use Catans, we tend to just run them without any support. We run them solo. They do their own thing. They're their own beast in itself. So the detachment doesn't always necessarily matter. Even if you're playing the Annihilation Legion and the detachment rule doesn't apply, the enhancements don't apply, the stratagems don't apply, there's still nothing wrong with taking a Catan. You can still field a Transcendent Catan or a Void Dragon, whatever. Maybe it's actually a good thing in that detachment, in particular with the Deceiver, because you can relocate or reposition your Scorbut Destroyers into a better place in your deployment. But this creates like a number of questions, like when do you need Catan? Do we shoehorn Catan into our lists at the end of the list build? Or do we, is it like an afterthought? Do we shoe them into the end of our lists as an afterthought when we're building lists? Or do we sort of plan ahead and say, you know what, the first thing in my list is a Catan? Because they are like 300-ish points, and you can't just sort of shoehorn a 300-point model at the end of your list. So there has to be some sort of thought process to why am I selecting a Catan? But then you've got a next question. It leads to another question. Are we just better taking units that relate to the detachment rule rather than taking a Catan? If you're spending 300 points or so on one of these Catans, you could instead be taking like another Doomsday Arc, and then you've got like 100 points spare or so. And that could apply much better to the Starshatter Arsenal than maybe a Catan could. So there's like lots of mini questions. It sort of creates more questions than answers, really. I mean, another detachment, for example, the Canoptek Court. Let's say you've got 2 units of Canoptek Wraiths, and you say, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna select a Void Dragon for this Canoptek Court. He's gonna run solo, do his own thing." But you could instead select a 3rd unit of Canoptek Wraiths, get a Technomancer in there. Is that a better option? You're now relating to the detachment rule. You can relate to the stratagem. You've got another leader in there, so you can get Curse of the Cryptek going off. So when do we select Catan nowadays? Because I'm finding that I'm not really selecting them as often as I used to. So that's what I want to ask you guys. In the comments down below, how are you selecting Catan? What detachment are you using with Catan? Are they shoehorned in at the end of your list, or are they the original part of your list? Are you saying, right, number 1 in this list, Nightbringer? Is that how you're doing it? Let me know down in the comments below how you're playing Catan, because I really do want to know.